wind and how you deal with it can make or break a musky trip. Thanks for tuning in to our latest video as we break down our strategies for dealing with wind, from the big rollers of Eagle Lake, Ontario to the flat calm conditions as we fish out on Cedar. We'll discuss how we deal with choosing locations based on wind and how we choose our lures based on how windy it is on any given day.
I think it's a muskie.
Hey guys, Glenn McDonald with 54 Bust, and welcome back to another video. Appreciate you guys all tuning in. And today, a topic that everybody talks about, wind. Either you have too much of it or not enough. Put out a little bit of a feeler in the YouTube community tab, and a lot of people asked about wind conditions, and in particular, Jim Janik asked about fishing on Lake of the Woods and dealing with wind and how we pick lures and locations based off of the wind. Unfortunately, Jim, we don't fish Lake of the Woods a bunch, but the information that we're going to have here today should apply to all the lakes in the area, and we're going to start right now. Wind seems to worry everybody, especially those that come from other locations and come into northwestern Ontario for their maybe annual muskie trip. You cannot predict the weather. You can plan for it as best as you can, but you get here and you just have to deal with the weather as you get it. And for us, we're not full-time muskie guides. We're not on the water every single day. So even for us, we only get to fish 2 or 3 days a week. So we can't really pick around the weather. We get a couple days off and we got some chances to go fishing. So we're going to go. So we always look at the weather on the morning of our trip. And if it's going to be, just for example, a strong northwest blow, we're going to pick a location or a lake based on that wind and which lake is going to give us the most fishable water. And alternatively, if it's going to be a day where we have almost no wind, it's going to be flat calm, maybe we have bluebird skies, we're going to base our locations and our lakes on choices that are going to give us the most fishable area where we think the fish will be. So if we're starting with flat calm or near calm conditions, a lot of cases that's coming off of a storm front, and now we're going to be a pressure change and it's starting to get high pressure. Those clear bluebird sky days, which everybody dreads, and some guys come up here for a week of muskie fishing and have a whole week of it. You still have to get out and fish. For us, the very first thing we look at if we have those clear, flat, calm conditions is the fish are going to be a little bit more negative, and they're going to spook easy because of a lot of our lakes up here are fairly clear water, so that means you can't get right on top of the structure. So we're looking at weed structure or rock structure where there's a lot of hiding spots within that structure for the fish to kind of get out of those calm conditions. So second to that, for us, when we're looking at flat calm or near calm conditions, for lure selection, we're using our best producing, our highest confidence lures. So we're talking bucktails that you've had a lot of success with. Flat calm conditions lead itself to topwater, and topwater is always a good search tool because it's slow moving. It'll go right over top of the fish, and you could get a reactionary strike that a fish otherwise wouldn't chase a bait out of structure or out of cover. So those are the type of baits we're looking at, is highest producing, most confident lures that you have. Those are the lures you want to use on those bluebird days or anytime you got those flat calm or near calm conditions. So as we go into this clip here, we're fishing up on Cedar Lake, and we've seen some fish in this area, and we're fishing the outside edge of a weed bay, and I get hit way out from the boat. And what we're trying to do here is we're keeping the boat well off of the weeds. We don't even really want to be anywhere close to the weed line with the boat. We want to just be reaching it with our cast so that we don't spook any fish. Sometimes you drift in a little bit too tight and you spook those fish off of those edges of the weeds. And in this case, we were able to stay back because we know this area well. But if you're on your week of muskie fishing in Canada, any of these main structures like this, you want to go out and try and map them out on your off days, so that, or your off hours, so that you can go back to them with some confidence and know that you're not going to be over top of the structure. This next clip, we're fishing up on Peril, and it's near calm conditions. And again, we're fishing the edge of a weedy basin, and this time we had to actually get into the edge of the weeds, and I cast way up into the thickest portion of the weeds. and that fish was sitting in about 2 feet of water in some heavy, heavy cabbage, and we were able to bring that fish out to the outer edge of the weed line where I was able to hook him up in the figure 8. But in this case, it was all about trying to get to the densest weeds where those fish were hiding on, again, these kind of bluebird sky days. As wind conditions increase and you start to get more kind of quote-unquote walleye chop on the water, it opens up the lake to you a little bit. You can fish a little bit tighter to structure. The fish aren't going to spook as easy because they have the waves as cover, and you can get your boat tighter to the structure, which gives you more casting angles, and you can be more precise with your casting. So in this next segment here, fishing with my buddies Matt and Ron, and we're on Eagle Lake. We're fishing just around a point, and I get hit right behind at the back of the boat, right on the top, and I was using a scallywag by Lumox Lures. It's kind of a modified dive and rise glide bait, and we have a little bit of a west wind here, and it doesn't look like it in the video that it's very windy, but we're tucked in behind that point, and what we're trying to do is fish that seam of windswept current meeting that slack water behind the point. And in a lot of times, as the wind's starting to pick up over the course of the day, those are the areas that we look for. We look for those spots that have mixed conditions, and you have a spot where you have main lake wind meeting calm water behind a protective piece of structure, whether it's an island or a point or a reef. In those situations, as the wind starts to pick up, you can still use a variety of lures. We like to start moving into dive and rise, into rubber, into heavier bucktail, stuff that will get down a little bit deeper in the water column and a little bit less affected by the waves at the top. We typically don't use a lot of top water as the wind starts to increase, although a noisy top water can be beneficial at times, but just generally speaking, as the wind starts to increase, we try to get to a little bit heavier lure and try to get down in the water column and away from the wind and the waves at the top of the water. In this clip, Kyla and I are fishing up on Long Legged, and we are fishing the downside of a main lake reef. And Kyla's casting up on the reef, and she's pulling her lure, in this case a jointed crankbait, downwind across the rocks, and she had a really nice follow. Unfortunately, this one does get off as she does her hook set here, and we come back later in the day and she was able to capitalize on this fish. But the key here is we are casting upwind and trying to bring our lures downwind, kind of across the fish's face, and trying to get those fish to react to us as we're bringing our bait across the top of that structure in the most natural way possible.
There we go.
It doesn't always work to be able to cast upwind. Some cases you just cannot cast upwind and bring your lure downwind into the face of a fish. In this clip, I'm casting kind of parallel with the wind, so kind of along the waves, and we're rolling up onto a sandy gravel bar, and we know this structure really well, so I was able to kind of pinpoint my cast to the edges of the structure where I historically know where it'll be. So again, if you're on your musky trip, you want to find some of these areas and map them out, put some waypoints so you know where that structure is, so when you come back there at key times, you can fish it effectively without getting too tight on the structure or being too far back. The key to fishing as it's starting to get rougher on the lake is balancing boat control and presentation with being able to fish effectively on any given piece of structure. As it gets windier and you're getting blown into structure with waves, it's not effective. You're constantly trying to move the boat in and out, so you need to find an effective strategy, whether it means fishing on the leeward side of a point or the leeward side of structure or an island, or just minimizing the time that you're totally affected by the waves or the wind. And it can be hard at times, but a strategy that we always use is we always give ourselves a portion of our day or a portion of our trip where we're going to brave the wind and we're going to put ourselves in a tough situation to try and cast what we would consider to be an A spot on any given lake despite the wind conditions. So this next clip coming up, my brother-in-law Richard and I were fishing Eagle, and we had just a brutal north wind. And here's a little map of Eagle Lake, and you can see the wind directions, and we had just wind blowing hard from the north. We weren't able to fish pretty much anything on the main lake basin. We were trying to hide behind islands and fish the south-facing shorelines. And we moved a few fish, but we just couldn't convert on anything. So as we were heading in, we were like, let's give ourselves a shot at one main lake structure. And in this clip, we pulled up on a main lake reef, and we weren't probably 6 or 8 casts in, and I got hit on a dive and rise, which I was using on purpose, trying to get deeper in the water column and something that would hang in front of the fish's face. And in this case, it really paid off because we put a beautiful 51 1/4 in the boat on a day that otherwise we might not have encountered a big fish like this. Now, the opposite of giving yourself time to fish in the rough water is just picking a lake or picking a location that you can completely get out of the wind. And for us up here in northwestern Ontario, we're totally blessed that we have lakes in every direction within a half hour of where we live. So if we wake up in the morning and we have a really strong wind and it's just going to take some lakes off the table, or the landings are not going to be advantageous to try and get in. So this particular day we had a super strong south wind. So a lot of our lakes, our landings are south facing. So it's just not feasible to even put in. So we decided to go up to Cedar, and here's a map of Cedar and the wind conditions. So you can see the wind coming up from the south or the wind from the west. The west arm of Cedar gives us a lot of fishable water based on those two wind conditions. So this particular day we went up to Clark's Northern Lights Resort. We put in at their landing, which is actually a north-facing landing. We just pushed off ashore. We're getting the boat prepped up. I was just going to take a couple casts just to make sure everything was working. I end up getting hit on my second cast, and we put a beautiful 50-inch fish in the boat right off the get-go to start our day. We fished the entire day on the west arm of Cedar, and while we didn't put any more fish in the boat, we were able to fish effectively because that lake suits itself well to a south-facing wind. Had we chose another lake such as Eagle, where almost every landing on Eagle is south-facing, we would have had a hard time getting the boat in, and we would have had a hard time fishing effectively all day to get ourselves out of the wind. So that's a situation where you need to know what type of water you can fish with any given wind. Here's a trip that Hunter McDonald from Temple Bay and I took out on Eagle, and we have a bit of a southeast wind. And we were fishing out of the wind for the most part, but because the conditions were changing and we had a front moving in, we knew we needed to fish some of our A structure. So here we are on one of our A pieces of structure. I cast way out from the boat, and it's not terribly windy in this location. It is windy, but the waves weren't super rough because it's kind of protected from islands. So it was a location that we were able to get in and fish effectively. And we were able to put, I believe, 2 fish in the boat. Another strategy that we use a lot is just trying to get out of the wind without being totally off of our, what we would consider our A spot. So here we are sucker rigging. And a lot of times sucker rigging for muskies, you can't really control where you're going to fish. You're going to fish where the bait fish are, and the muskies are following the bait fish. So this particular day, we wanted to fish a couple pieces of main lake structure that were holding bait, but it was just too windy from the northwest. So we moved down into a narrow channel, and because it was a narrow channel, we didn't have a lot of waves to contend with, but what we did have is a lot of blowing, gusting wind. And even though the video doesn't show much for wind, it was very windy, and we were hiding behind that point, just in behind the boat, enough that it was keeping us out of the direct blow of the wind, and we could effectively fish with suckers and have a presentation that we could control. So by choosing where we wanted to fish on that lake, we were able to capitalize on catching a couple fish and not having to contend with the really strong wind. For us, there's probably 2 or 3 key things that we look at when it comes to wind. So first is, when we plan a day of fishing, what's the wind condition and how strong is it going to be? How many lakes is that going to kind of open up to us, or is there a few lakes that will just be off the table? And how it might relate to you guys if you're coming up to Canada for a trip. Take some time and plan out over the winter what the predominant wind conditions are going to be like on the lake that you're staying at, and map it out on a lake. similar to like this picture here. I'll take a picture and I'll show a northwest wind, which is what we get a lot of in northwestern Ontario. So if you look at this picture and you start to visualize, okay, if it's blowing very strong, where can I fish on this body of water? And if it's not blowing super strong, how much more of that lake does it open up to me? So that's how we plan our day, is just what direction is the wind? How strong is it going to be? And then from there, we look at, okay, what's the conditions going to be like throughout the day? Is it going to get windier, or are we starting to clear off as the day, gets towards the end of sunset, the end of the day? And we try and plan what's going to be our best time out on the water. We'll use our moon phases in conjunction with that, but we try to pick the best possible time to be on the water given the conditions that you have. And now, within those conditions, are there going to be windows that you think are going to be more advantageous around the moon phases? Well, then we want to try and maximize those as best as we can. And again, in windy conditions or those complete lack of wind conditions, go to your confidence lures. Those are not the conditions to be trying a bunch of new stuff that you don't have a bunch of confidence in. And especially for you guys coming up to Canada for your once a year trip, make sure you have those confidence lures and rely on them a lot. Don't worry about what the guides or the locals are telling you was a hot bait. If it's not something that's familiar to you, stick with what your confidence bait is, and that's just going to prove it's going to be easier for you to fish it, and you're just going to have a more effective time covering the water. And the last piece of advice I want to give is always give yourself some time in your day to fish that main lake spot or your A spot despite the wind or despite the weather. Give yourself a little bit of time to try and get out on those spots where you know you're going to have a good shot at seeing a big fish or a nice fish. And as long as you can comfortably have boat control around it, try those spots. Give yourself a little bit of each day to do it, and perhaps like we had at the earlier part of this video where we got a big fish on the main lake structure on Eagle Lake, it'll pay off. But you can't fish in heavy wind all day. It's just not effective, and it's dangerous at times. So you want to just limit those times till just key parts of the day and just brave the wind a little bit when you can. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, 54 Bust is out of here, and we'll catch you guys out on the water later.